Gary Leon Ridgway, also known by the Green River Killer, was born on February 18, 1949 in Salt Lake City, Utah. Gary was a criminal who was the country's deadliest convicted serial killer. He claimed to have killed as many as 80 women, many whom were prostitutes in Washington during the 1980s and 90s. Although he pled guilty to only 48 murders, Gary grew up in what became SeaTac, Washington. His father was a bus driver and his mother a sales clerk. The younger Gary claimed that his mother engaged in inappropriate behavior. Notably, he alleged that after wetting the bed, a habit that persisted into his early teens, she would wash his genitals. At some point, he began fantasizing about killing her, and in the mid-1960s he stabbed a young boy. After graduating from high school in 1969 at the age of 20, Gary served a 2-year stint in the U.S. Navy and later settled in the Seattle area, where he worked as a truck painter. Over the next 30 years, he married 3 times and had a son. In 1980, Gary was arrested for allegedly choking a prostitute, but no charges was filed after he claimed that the woman had bit him. 2 years later, he was arrested for solicitation. Gary was believed to have begun his killing spree shortly thereafter. His first victim was thought to have been a 16-year-old girl who went missing after leaving her foster home in July 1982. Her body was found a week later in the Green River. Over the next 2 years, Gary raped and killed more than 40 women, many of whom were prostitutes or runaways. A number of Gary's early victims were later found in or near the river, giving rise to the nickname Green River Killer. Other bodies were discovered in remote wooded areas. After 1984, he committed several more murders, the last occurring in 1998. By August 1982, police believed that a serial killer was at work, and they eventually formed a special task force. Gary soon became a suspect. In 1983, he was questioned in the disappearance of a prostitute who a witness claimed had gotten into his truck. Gary denied the allegations and passed a polygraph in 1984. Detectives later discovered a 1982 report about police finding Gary with a prostitute in a parked car. 2 years later, a body was found nearby. In 1987, law enforcement officials obtained a search warrant for Gary's home and work. However, none of the items, including carpet fibers and ropes, could be linked to the victims. They also obtained a DNA sample from Gary, but the technology then available was unable to match it with semen recovered from the bodies. However, following the advent of more sophisticated tests, a match was made in 2001. And Gary was arrested later that year. Although he initially proclaimed his innocence, Gary soon confessed to the crimes, stating that he wanted to kill as many prostitutes as possible. He targeted sex workers because he thought they might not be reported missing and because he hated most of them. In 2003, he accepted a plea deal in which he was sentenced to 48 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. In addition, he agreed to reveal the location of undiscovered bodies. Many speculated that he was responsible for more deaths, and in 2013, Gary said that he murdered upwards of 80 women.